Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, Salam Etymology with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today we have a presentation titled Shalom and its Egyptian Origin, subtitled The Power of Linguistics for Historical Analyses. And we will talk about my hypothesis that the Hebrew Shalom and Arabic Salam and the famous Assalamu Alaikum are in fact words that are of ancient Egyptian origin and was gifted to Semitic during a Proto-Semitic stage. And so I'll show how all of that comes about. And this is actually part one of a two-part series where we will continue the discussion, but we're focused on the equivalency of Shalom or Salam and ancient Egyptian Hotep. So all that and more when we return in just a moment. And we are back. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen so we can get started. But make sure that first and foremost that you like and subscribe for those of you who do not subscribe to the channel as of yet or have not subscribed to the channel as yet. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you can get to notice every single time that we have a show or upload a pre-recorded video. And we'll get into some more things a little later, probably at the end, but for now, get started here. So let me make this a full screen. And does it want to share? And we are good. So let me make this full screen here. There we go. And then that way y'all can get the full impact of the tables and the like. So again, we're dealing with Proto-Semitic Salam or Shalom in Hebrew, Salam in Arabic, Salim in Akkadian, and all different kind of variants. And is borrowing from ancient Egyptian. So this is part one of a two-part analysis. So why is, I'll just use that. Okay. Because I'm hitting the wrong button. I should know better. But the main arguments for today is that Proto-Semitic Salam, and note that they don't reconstruct the vowels because there's many different forms to the word depending upon context. And you know, with Semitic languages, they are very tri-consonant centered. And the changing of the vowels kind of change the context of the word. So a lot of times they'll just reconstruct the three primary consonants if it's a triliteral. So what I'm arguing is that this triliteral here is in fact from ancient Egyptian, and that ancient Egypt actually has more variants of this word. And you may know them as Hotep. And one of the other major variants is Seneb. So I'm saying that Seneb and or Senim is the more than likely the direct ancestor of the Salam that you see at the top of the screen there. And so there's a number of forms, and we'll show you how confusing this gets. But the fact that ancient Egypt has all of these forms and that Semitic only has one form informs us that this is in fact a borrowing from ancient Egyptian, along with some other facts that we'll get into at the end of the presentation. So here is a few variants of the root. In Akkadian, you have Shalom. In Ugaritic, you have in Hebrew, you have Shalom, which means peace, well-being, hello as a greeting, and goodbye. So both coming and going. And Phoenician just has Shalem, right? And in Hebrew, this is how you would write it, and it's written from right to left. So this would be the Shalom here. So you just read it this way, right? And in Arabic, it is without the sh sound. It's just the s sound. And so they say Salam, peace. And then here's the phrase here, as-salamu alaikum, peace be upon you. And then, of course, it's the same root to the very name of the religion itself, Islam, for submission. And you have Muslim is one who submits. And then Taslim, delivering peace, giving a salutation or a submission. Istaslim, the act of submitting oneself, surrendering. Mustasalim, one who submits oneself or surrenders. And then we have Salam or Salam, subject of Salim, it's Salim. The vase is Salim. The vase is whole or unbroken, right? So you can see how in one context it means submit, but then in another context it can mean whole and unbroken. And then Salam, undisputed, right? So this is one of the reasons why you have to reconstruct the triconsonantal root, because again, all of these different iterations here provide a different type of nuance, right? And this is from the text, The Biradical Origin of Semitic Roots. And the author, she gives a number of forms across the Semitic languages with some additional context that'll be important later. So like when I go to this biblical Hebrew here, it says Shalom, to be complete, sound, to keep peace, and Shalom, completeness, welfare, peace. And if we go down here to the Sabaean language, you have Shalem, be finished, perfect, accomplished. And then Salam, make peace, soundness, and health, right? So, besides well-being and prosperity, et cetera, to be intact. So in Ugaritic, Shalem, here, this would kind of go with that Arabic one that we saw earlier, Salima, be intact, to be whole, or a sense. And so it's a wide range of meanings given here, right? And so what I argue is that there's fundamentally it's a kind of a matrix of meanings, and that matrix centers around the consonantal skeleton, and it's similar in ancient Egyptian. However, what we're going to find out in ancient Egyptian is that this triconsonantal, this s, el, or sh, elim, is a biconsonantal in Egyptian and in the other African languages that we're going to be using to prove this point a little later. But there's a few things that I want to note beforehand that I want y'all to keep in mind. And again, this is a video, so you can kind of go back, or you can kind of pause the video and take notes as you see them. So I won't go through these in depth. They're here for reference, but just keep in mind what I'm saying, and then you can come back to see the individual examples. So we mentioned earlier that Seneb is one of the variants that I argue gave birth to Proto-Semitic Salam, right? But note that this Seneb, which you see here in the second column here, also has a variant Seref, where the middle sound, the N, becomes R, and where the B becomes F. So Seref, Seneb. So you have Seref, hotter, fiery, Seref, to warm, to be warm. And then you have Seneb, to burn. Seref, to build, Seneb, to build. Right? And then it goes on and on. There's other examples that I give in both Umoja Volume 2 and the latest text, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, where you can see this kind of play out, right? So, and I have the sound correspondences there. So keep that in mind. So in between the two consonants, it can be either an R or an N sound. But here's just some more examples of that phenomenon that I'm talking about that we see here. So you can come back and kind of pause and look at these examples and see that in between two consonants, that ancient Egyptian R will have an allophone of N, right? And then secondly, the N sound also corresponds to this symbol here. That is what we call a nasalized uvula trill that we have right here. So this represents the vulture glyph that we see here at the top. And so because this is a nasalized uvula trill, it makes sense why it interchanges with the N, which is a nasal sound in ancient Egyptian. So again, this is here for your edification. You can come back here to verify the interchange of this. So it doesn't matter what position. It can be in the middle, it can be at the end or at the beginning. N interchanges with the nasalized uvula trill, right? So this becomes important when we're talking about, for example, Shalom. So we have here at the bottom Hebrew and Arabic, Shalom and Salaam, both meaning peace, total well-being. And so what is the L sound in the center is corresponding to the N sound in ancient Egyptian in the center here, right? And so Middle Egyptian is going to be Seneb, health, be healthy, safe, be alive, get well, recover, be cured, recovery of illness, well-being. And then we have cognates in the Igbo language. So you say Ujima, well-being, it is good, and that Od meaning it is. And so it is ma. And so it's really, how should I say, NM, just like what you see in Yoruba here, Sinmi and Isi Sinmi, meaning to rest. The N assimilates to the following M. So it becomes M or Mima, right? When it's really Nima. But it's the N assimilated here in Igbo. So in a Karanga language, which is a Bantu language in Zimbabwe, they say Simba, meaning health. And so what's in these examples, in terms of the Igbo, Yoruba, and the Karanga language, the vowel that is in between the M and the B, or the N and the M, and the M and the M have disappeared. So they have collapsed into each other. Whereas in the Hebrew and the Arabic, the vowels still remain in between them. So this is how you read them. And we speculate that the Egyptian was the same way. It didn't. I should say it did have the vowels. So it wasn't like his, more so like Salab or Sanab or Sanum, whatever the vowels may have been, right? And so what I want to get people to understand is that the word Seneb, I have this green S highlighted here because this is a prefix on this root here, the NB, the red root. And so we can see this in this particular table here. So we have, for example, neber with the nasalized uvular trill suffix, meaning to tie. Sometimes when this is in the third consonant or second consonant position, it indicates a verb, right? But then we have a prefix S here on seneb, and it means cord or twine. So you can see how the concept of meaning to tie comes to mean a cord or twine or a rope, right? So you have neb or nebu, creator, builder, the masculine suffix here, or mu in Bantu, which is a prefix in Bantu. And then you have seneb, meaning to build. And then we have nibi, artist, creator, right? With the nisba right here. And then we have nebu, a wooden device. And then senebwi, part of a boat, which was made out of wood, of course. They didn't have steel ships back in the day. And et cetera, et cetera. But I have more examples in the text where you can see that when you see seneb, seneb is built off of a biconsonantal root in B. And so if our argument is sound, and many Semiticists and Egyptologists equate seneb with shalom, this would indicate that this is your first indication that it is a borrowing, because the sh is not a prefix and the s is not a prefix in these Semitic languages. It just comes as this. It can't be reduced to its biconsonantal root, right? And that same NB in Proto-Great Lakes Bantu corresponds to an L and M as in Mary consonant sequence, right? So you have neb, creator or builder, and then you have lem, create, string a bow, and then lemi, meaning creator or maker, because it has that same I. Remember this here that you see, or J, meaning artist or creator. Nebi in Proto-Great Lakes Bantu is lemi, creator, maker, right? So we're making a point here. So we're proving that, first of all, the seneb variants here derive from neb, and we can see that we can confirm the biconsonantal roots by looking at some biconsonantal roots and their proto-reconstructions for the Great Lakes Bantu languages. So neb, a plant, and then lama, comprendum, is a species of plant. Neb meaning to protect, lam meaning to look after. And then that same nisbi here with the masculine suffix here, or protector, as in the same context here. You have neb, lord, master, owner, husband. Lem, rule, govern, dominate, right? Nebet, lordship, T suffix of abstracts. And so here we have seneb, to be healthy, health, to heal. And then in Proto-Great Lakes Bantu, you have lamu, good health, life, longevity, right? So this is an essential proof here of the biconsonantal root of this. So the current Bantu languages and ancient Egyptian keeps the historic structure, but when it was borrowed into Proto-Semitic, they only got it at the time that it was seneb, so it became shalom. And I should let you know that seneb, the B and M sounds interchange not only in ancient Egyptian and many Bantu languages, but it also interchanges in Semitic as well, right? So here's another set of correspondences. The only thing that is important for right now for this, and again, you can come back and verify or assess my correspondences here, but the M as in Mary as the first consonant here corresponds to this H with the loop under it that we colloquially pronounce as K, right? But you know, I have some arguments that this is actually like a ng sound, like in like in the word song, right? So and then in the second consonant position is R, and then we know that this is a type of R with the nasalized uvular trill R, right? So just showing you this because this is going to be important for a slide later on at the end. And this makes me suggest that, you know, the word remech, human being, man, or remechet, humankind, people, is just a variant of this word here, rechiet, common folk, humankind, subjects of the king, right? And this is another topic for another time, but it's possible that these two are different variations of each other. So now we're going to get into the etymology of Salaam in Proto-Semitic via ancient Egyptian. So what I argue is that it's possibly two different origins for this word that kind of merged or coalesced together. And so one word means to bow down, to bend down, to submit, to set of the sun to rest. And then the other word means to be well, healthy, last, long, right? But it's interesting to me because there's a way that you can link. It's a roundabout way, but there's still a way that you can link to be well and to be healthy from this notion of to bow down, to bend down, to set of the sun to rest. It's possible. But I'm going to argue, however, that it's still two different roots that you can get from here to here, and it's probably done in a few contexts. But the main context for the second meaning is this one right here, the last long, right, to resurface. So in Umoja Volume 2, I have a chapter on the etymology of Seneb. So that if you have Umoja Volume 2, I encourage you to reread that chapter, and all of this is going to make a lot more sense, right? So as I mentioned before, there are many different variations of these roots in the ancient Egyptian language. So one dialect, one group of people went into the Levant, and they brought with them the variant of the word that ultimately became Salim, Shalom, Shalom in the Semitic languages. But we have here Khareb, meaning to bend down, to bow. And this version here is attested in the New Kingdom, which you see right here, Khareb, to bend, to bow in submission, right? And then we have Kharem, to bend down, to bow, to bend the arm, to bow down. But this one is found in the Old Kingdom, right? So in the Old Kingdom, the root ended in M, and then in the New Kingdom, the root ended in B. So we got to keep that in mind. And then we have this variant here, hadeb, to overthrow, prostrate, to halt at. And to prostrate is to bow down, and we'll show an image a little later of what that is. And then we have this other one, hateb, to overthrow, to prostrate. So we can see that these technically are really different variations of each other. So these are the voiced variants in terms of the two, and then these are the unvoiced variant of the two, right? So they're practically the same. But the hadeb variant, this is found in the Middle Kingdom, and then again this one is found in the New Kingdom, right? And then we have what I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, hotep, or hotep as y'all would like to say, the set of the sun. And then we have hotep, to rest, to be satisfied. So this notion of to set, to settle, leads to rest. Like if you're going to sleep, you settle down, you go down like the setting of the sun, to rest, to sleep. And then that's where the concept of peace comes from. So, but that same act of setting is in another semantic lane means to bend down. And then, but you get a different set of meanings here, because now we're talking about to bow in submission. So that's when, like, it is especially prominent in the Arabic language. That's why Islam means to submit, and a Muslim is one who submits. But that same as-salam, that same root, gives them peace in their greeting of peace when they say assalamu alaikum. And then you respond like wa alaikum salam, right? And so the different trajectories on these particular roots here. And so this notion of bending, so remember that when we dealt with the Proto-Great Lakes Bantu, what was Neb became Lem. And in Chiluba, which is not a Great Lakes Bantu language, but I believe some has spoken towards the end, but it's more so in the center of Africa than the Great Lakes. So they still respond to lema, to bend, arc or spring, the nail to attach, lemuka, to relax. So you can see from the concept of to bend, with another suffix added to it, it means to relax. But it can also, in a second meaning, mean to be disbanded, to be powerless, to be castrated. And then we have leba, meaning to swing, to curve, to bend. So you can see in the same language, there's a dialect variant. One has M as a second consonant and the other one E. Now, if we're dealing with the Negro Egyptian model or Chiena Intu, this variant here is what we would argue is from the Kikwe branch of Chiena Intu. But from the Kweki branch comes the Yoruba language. And so this word lema, leba, meaning to bend, to curve, is bere, to bend, to crouch. Ibere, the act of bending or stooping, which would have another variant here, or I would suggest pereg, meaning to squat, to crouch, to cower, with if we can prove that G here is in fact a suffix, right? So more investigation here. And so we mentioned that hotep is one of the roots, or one of the variants, I should say. And in Chiluba, what we have for the root, because hotep comes from tep. And here are just some correspondence is showing you that what is tep in Egyptian becomes the root will be a S and in Chiluba. So sumba, right? Or somba. Tep, dagger, sumba, to brandish a weapon, right, in the verbal form. But we have here hasebet, knife, which becomes mulumbu, knife, right? So there's this interchange, because the Proto-Bantu is D. It's really an interchange between D and S. But most times D becomes L in Chiluba, right? So that's how, this comes about. Tep best, Sambu best, most, furthermore, more, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So notice when in these forms, when the root is seb and dotted H, it still corresponds to somba, right? So this is probably the same thing going on in ancient Egyptian, to where a tep is really like a D, or something closer to a D sound, depth, right? And then interchanging with seb, right? And so we have Haseb ground, Haseb garden plot, and this corresponds to Nzubu welling house, abode, Kazubu field, cell unit, Tep formation of the abstractions, and then Tepu fields. And you should all know by now that the formations of the abstract derive from words meaning land or place, right? So you can come back to this and see this, right? So prove that, Hatep comes from Tep. We can find the correspondences here in Chiluba with the root being some variant of S-MB. And we can see here for Hetep, like Hetep, to set of the sun, to dwell, Hetepu, setting of the sun, Hetepi, an item of furniture, Hetepu, peace, contentment, Hetep, the dormant, the resting one, becomes in Chiluba, Somba, to be seated, to sit down, to talk, to dwell, retire, to rest, Chi Sombelu, living room residence, right? So Hotep would be Chi Somba or Chi Sombelu in Chiluba Bantu, right? So we have Hetep, food offerings, blood offering, slab Hetepit, Sahetepit, wild catch, Hetep, nature, God sacrifice, Setep, right? To cut up an animal, the butcher to cut off limbs, corresponds to Egyptian Somba, meaning to hunt, to fish. And then we have a different variant. So we know that because, for example, we see this Sahetep, meaning wild catch, corresponds to this root here, tepiu, meaning fish, which is a wild catch, right? From this verb root meaning to cut up or to hunt, basically. Hetep, harmful action. Sumbuka, transgress, violate, disregard. Right. So keep this in mind when we're doing this. So this will become more relevant in the second part, but I'm just so you can kind of get the sound gist. And so in Kikongo language, what is tep is going to be the same thing, but I also want to show SB is going to also correspond to SMB as far as consonants are concerned, or ZM, like as we see here. So y'all can pause and come back to this. And also, DWR, right? Or DW uvula trill, nasalized uvula trill, becomes samba, to pray, to entreat, to supplicate, worship, etc., etc. Sambuluk, to bless, etc. Dua, people say duau, is sambila, to climb, to ascend, to get up, to go up on a rooftop, to mount, to jump, to get on board. In other words, to get on top of something, to rise. And then duau, a divine essence, really is Simbi, spirit, ancestral being, Kisimbi, genie, water spirit, nature spirit, and it's probably at the root of Nzambi, divine, divinity, God, right? Or etc. We can go down the list. But all of this to say is that the root of Hetep and its variation is going to correspond with Bantu SMB, ZMB or ZM, JMB or JM, right? And so all of these correspond here. So this will become important later. So I'm just showing you that ancient Egypt was kind of a dialect hub, and you'll see these same words in different formats, right? So this is why, when we look at all of these particular variants here, there was a lot of sound changes and the like going, and it would, take me a while to go through how these are necessarily different variations, but we'll in terms of the particular rules, but this is going to become very important as we go. But I wanted to show here, like, so when we're talking about, for example, to bend down, to prostrate, hadeb, to overthrow, to prostrate, to halt, khateb, to overthrow, to prostrate. And, this is coming from the same root as hatep, to set of the sun, to rest, to be satisfied. So you notice there's different prefixes that give a different nuance. And these different prefixes and the vowels more than likely play an integral role in the voicing or devoicing of these consonant sounds here. Right? So these are definitely different prefixes on the root. So in the Yoruba language, that this notion of to fall is shubu, to fall. And then you have dubu, to lie across or athwart, or kind of diagonally a bit. So this is what you see here. This is dubu, or in essence, shubu, right? Did you see this person lying across, falling to the ground? And so you can see, for those of you who are Ifa or Isheshe practitioners, right? In Yoruba culture, prostrating to important people, to elders, your parents and the like. This is key and central in terms of good etiquette and community building amongst Yoruba people. And you can kind of see this in this exchange here in this cartoon drawing right here. You can see the young person prostrating in front of this person here is somebody, right? So the act of prostrating is called idobale. That means to thwart or to fall to the ground. Ile, the ground, right? And I want to argue that the idupe, thanks and thanksgiving, is ultimately from the same root. And I'm still working on that, which will be corresponding here to the dua, to thank, to praise. And so remember that dua is in that same categorization of correspondences that we dealt with earlier. So, but that's going to be another subject for another conversation. So just giving you a preview here, right? And here's just some more Yoruba greetings and prostrating. So we don't expect the women to necessarily get on the ground like you see here. This is all men, on the ground here, and so sometimes for health reasons or just women in general, they'll more so bend like this, like you see this person here greeting, or they'll bend down like this that you see here, that where my mouse is circling, right? And so, but this form here that you see at the top on the right hand side, this is called ekun or okun, which is the root is that meaning knee, but then you have ikun le, to kneel, to bow. So when you see that same le is in idobale, the act of prostrating, because the le has to deal with the ground. So this is about falling or prostrating on the ground, right? Ikunle, the act of kneeling, saying, or bowing, right? To kneel, to bow. So that's what you're seeing here. So sometimes you'll see people doing this, and you can see this in the artwork. So if you didn't know, and you see some Yoruba artwork like this, and their knees are like that, you now know what it's called. They're in ikunle position, right? So now let's get to the many forms of the compared roots. So this is, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are, how should I say, different dialect variations of the inheritant words, right? And so, but I will go through the top, and the rest of them are just to confirm the sound correspondences. And you can pause them and go through each and every one of them. So we have neb, meaning to bind, to bend, to subjugate. Karef, to bend, to curve over, right? And so we have ku or k, another prefix on the root neb, right? And so, but now what is neb and rif, because actually this goes in this column, but I wanted to put it here because it has the Q prefix, to bend, to curve over, right? It is nim, to sleep. And then nemehi, to go to sleep, to lie down. Nimnimu, sleeping. And then we have another variant, inep, to be laid down, to lie down on the stomach. In other words, to prostrate, right? Dibber, we met that earlier, to fall down. And then sedeb, sunk. So this is what I'm showing you here, is how to determine the morpheme. So say you didn't know anything about ancient Egyptian language or any language, but you did know there was like a dictionary, and you can see what all the words mean next to the forms. When you start seeing like a common theme between, for example, in these cases, two consonants together, but in one word there's a third consonant that's suffixed to it, and it means one thing, but then you see this second word here and there's a prefix to it without that last suffix from the previous one. You know that these are the same root, but that the S must be a morpheme, a grammatical morpheme, and this R here must be a grammatical morpheme. So we have debir, meaning to fall down, and then we have the noun, or kind of verbal noun, sedeb, sunk, right? So we have nim, to sleep, and then nimhe, to go down, to sleep, to lie down, and then we have nim, a reduplication with a W suffix, sleeping, right? And then we have here saref, rest, relief, leisure, calm, down, to sit. Then we have daref or haref, to rest. And we can see this in this phrase here, saref tawi, who pacifies the two countries or the two lands. And then, of course, we have here hatep, to be satisfied, to rest, to set of the sun, set. Hatepu, peace, contentment. Hatepet, peace, right? So again, you can see the correspondences and the matrix of meanings in these roots. And so again, you can go to this line here and this line here, and these are different words here, but I'm showing you the sound correspondences, how they all relate to each other. So you can see the same thing in this slide here. All right, so I'll pause that for a little bit so that y'all can pause it and then come back after you've understood what corresponds to what and how they are relating to each other in terms of these terms. So if just on face value, one could argue that this is 5 different dialects or 5 different languages that are recorded in the ancient Egyptian records, right? And so here's some more, right? So what I'm trying to show you is that NB corresponds to NM, and they both correspond to DB, and they correspond to NF or RF, and also the TP, SB, ZF, right? RF, TEP, Deb, or even Jeb, Nim, Neb, right? So these are more than enough examples that, any linguist would have to, respect. And I have the slide here, but I'm not going to show it, but I may at the end just to show y'all. But the sh and n interchange and correspond to each other in ancient Egyptian. So we'll deal with that later, because the concept of respect and honor goes to the notion of to greet and exchange greetings, right? And then, of course, hatep used in a greeting, in the greeting itiotep in ancient Egypt. That's the full greeting, itiotep. So just to give you an example and a summary of these. So again, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I just want you to understand the sound correspondences. So in ancient Egyptian, the Semitic Shalom or Shalom, or Salaam in Arabic, was borrowed back into the ancient Egyptian language in the New Kingdom as Sherem. And so it has all the meanings here. So Sherem, peace, greeting, right? To lay down arms, to seek, to beg for peace, to make obeisance, right? So you see all these meanings in this form here. So this is the word coming back into ancient Egypt as Sharem. But ancient Egypt already had these words, and here just are a few, right? So you have nemeh, to beg, to entreat. Remember, to beg for peace. Dibeh, to ask, to beg, to pray for, which corresponds to dua or duer, to worship, which in Chiluba is lomba, to request, seek, ask for, to demand. Kilomba and Zambi, meaning to pray. Mulombi, one who asks, one who begs. And remember that the lom or lim also corresponds to sam or sim in Chiluba and in Bantu in general. So there's doublets in the language. So sambila, meaning to pray. And so this is how like the S or the sh and the N would correspond that we saw earlier. But it also corresponds to nemeh, meaning to be poor, and we know that you're poor if you're out there begging, right? And then we have senemeh, to pray, to make supplication. Senem, to pray, to beg from, to prayer and invocation, right? So when you are to bend down and to lay down your arms and to seek peace, it's not just simply you just bending over and laying down. You're begging, in the process. You're making in Abbassance, you're making an offering. So like when vassal countries have to give, some of their first fruits to the powerful country, that's what this is here. That's Shalom. That's Sharen in ancient Egyptian here, right? So you're begging for peace, and how you beg for peace is that you prostrate yourself, and that you extend your arms, you extend your hands, and oftentimes you're giving gifts. That's what to make Abbassance is, to give gifts, to give to pacify. And this is where this notion of giving offerings, for example, to deities or to ancestors, because they can make your life hell. And so that's why you bow down and you give Abbassance, you plead for peace and harmony, and then you offer them food in exchanges. That's why Hotep also means offerings, not only to set down, etc., etc. So all of these concepts are interrelated, and the different nuances depends on the prefixes and suffixes to the root, right? Other aspect of it, dealing with completeness, right? So as we mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, Salam and Shalom, there's a few languages where it means, for example, in the Sabaean, meaning to be finished, perfect, accomplished, and in Arabic, to be intact. In biblical Hebrew, Shalem, meaning being complete and sound. And so this concept of completeness is part of this root. And I would argue that that's one of the variants as well. And so what I argue that, the correspondent for that in the Egyptian would be, or one variant would be Tim, to be complete, to make complete. And notice that there's another prefix, the dotted H, hatem, to provide with, to complete, to be equipped. This is a different variation of the same word, hotep, right? And then there's a partial reduplication here in tut, meaning complete. But the intervocally or between two vowels, M becomes W, B can become W, or P can become W, right? So we have three different variations of the same root, meaning to be complete or to provide with, to be equipped with. And you could tell Hatep means the same thing. So the Hatem and Hatep are the same word, just different dialectical variations of the same root, right? And so this is going to be important, and we can prove this further by looking at another root. There's Salim and then Senem, right? And so this is from an article titled "The Word Salim and Senem and Some Words for Statue and Idol in Arabian and Other Semitic Languages." So this consonant root is is not the same as the other roots that we saw, but the same consonant sequence, Salam, in Akkadian, for example, is Salmu, meaning inscribed image, large or small statue. In Hebrew, Salam, image likeness. So, matter of fact, when you read in the Hebrew Bible and it says, let us make man in our own image, what they're really saying in Hebrew is Salam. Let us make man in our own Salam, which is really, the shadow or the double of the person. But I'm going to do a whole show dedicated to that, to this conversation right here. So we'll be back to this. But you can see in biblical Aramaics, Salamah, meaning image. In Syriac, meaning image, idol, etc. And then it goes on to say that the masculine substantive indicates an image in general, or an image of a god or a man. And with the T, it's the feminine form. So a goddess or a woman, right? So this is the name of the article. You can find it in this volume. This came out in 2020, right? So the same root for the TW that we saw earlier. So we have toot, meaning to complete, which is a variant of Tim. We can find that same toot, meaning to resemble, to be like, to be in accord with it. Tut, statue, likeness, image, which corresponds to Yoruba, dabi, to resemble, to be like, to seem, right? And just to show some sound meaning correspondences between the Yoruba and the ancient Egyptian, on this line here, we have chim, to think up, to invent, imagine. Daba, think, hope, imagine, speculate, conjecture. Chikam, tut, assembled, collected together, united to be in accord, full attire, complete, which in Yoruba is ODD, whole, complete unit. And we lost the second syllable, so the W is lost here. So probably due because there was no stress on the second syllable. Then we have toot, to be pleased. And then we have in Yoruba, doom, pleased. And if I should say that Yoruba in corresponds to ancient Egyptian B and M. And of course, since the W is a variant of M, that was the original. So there was probably a timid to be pleased, and then so it corresponds to doom, please. But we also have these secondary variants here: Joel or Jawal, please, and Jawal, to please. And remember, in Egyptian, Hotep, to be pleased, to be content, to make content. And then we have this other variant here in Jam, which probably be closer to this version in Yoruba, to be pleased. And it's also to bring joy, to be happy, right? So, this is the power of the historical comparative linguistics. It can it'll help to prove the different variations of it. And then again, showing again that even this image here, this word here is more than likely a borrowing from Egyptian, right? Because of the prefix that is fossilized here. And we'll get more into that once we get into when we have this discussion specifically on the word for image and likeness, right? And that same toot is in the name Tutankhamun, right? So this is how you would spell Tutankhamun's name, Tutankhamun, and right here, and this is the toot, but is really, it's either TW dot T, meaning the T is a suffix, or it is a partial reduplication, TW and then TW, but the second W was dropped, and that happens a lot in ancient Egyptian, right? But so now let's go on to the greeting. So just like how in I mentioned at the beginning, Hebrew people will greet each other sometimes using Shalom, right? And Arabic speaking people, they'll say salam or al salam alaikum, right? Um, but again, that same root for greeting, finds its correspondences in ancient Egyptian. So this is how we know that this word for greeting came from Egypt as well, because of the fossilized prefix that doesn't exist in Semitic. And so we had this variant nkwi, welcome. So remember earlier when I showed y'all that the ch corresponds to m, and remember that m, w, and b interchange. So they all interchange and they all correspond to each other. So these are different dialectical variations of the same word. So we have in Chikan, inkwi, welcome, inwi, exchange greetings, and nebeb, greetings. And with the S prefixed on seneb, you get to refresh, to greet. Senebeb, to exchange greetings, right? So here is the Hebrew Shalom, peace, hello, and Maltese, which is another Semitic language, Salam, to greet, to salute, right? Which in Igbo, remember earlier we showed you that ma is the word for healthy and well, right, and to rest. And so when they want to greet each other, they'll reduplicate it. They'll say ma, well, go well, safe journey, greeting to a person returning home, right? So remember that there's which one that we saw that was a greeting, both coming and going. That may have been at the beginning of the conversation. Yeah, it was, right? So, but these are all different dialect variations of each other. And so we have in Egyptian, Seneb, health, be healthy, safe, be alive, get well, to recover, to be cured, recovery of illness and well-being, and which will correspond to the MP in Vimpi in Kikongo, meaning health. And just like in ancient Egyptian, Seneb, to refresh, to greet, Senebeb, exchange greetings. We have Vimpi, meaning to compliment respectfully and to give regards, right? And to give regards is to send greetings, right? And so this phrase here in Kikongo, I send you my compliments, and beside my compliments, I send a goat. I bring gifts, right? So you see how all of this is coming together, and it may take a second listen and a pausing to read everything, and you'll see this all comes together beautifully. And even this concept of joy, Seneb Ib, means to strengthen the heart, to be happy. So when somebody is happy, they have a strong heart, right? A well and a whole and intact heart, a healthy heart, right? So this Ib means heart. So these combined, the neb and ib, means to be happy, but it literally means essentially to strengthen the heart or to have a strong heart. And again, I refer you to my article in Umoja Volume 2 on the etymology of seneb, and you'll see that seneb, meaning health and healthy and safe, comes across this notion of to live long, to be strong, to be able to recover and fight off illness, right? But that's another conversation for another day. But this same neb and lim that we saw earlier in Bantu, especially in Kikongo and isiZulu, is lunga. There's another variation of the same root as lunga, and we'll have to show the sound meaning correspondences maybe in the second video of this. But I wanted to show this from this article here, Writing Nature Cultures and Zulu Zionist Healing by Rune Fleek. And in this article, he states, in a study of Bantu healing rituals, Johnson sheds light on this when he argued that conceptions of health are captured in the notion of leading a balanced life. In Zulu, the root lunga, used in greetings wishing people health and well-being, include the notion of balance and harmony with the natural and social environment. To reestablish harmony and balance is thus a goal of the healing process. In order to achieve this, the rituals focused on the manipulation of places and relations to living and departed relatives to achieve healing. And again, this is remember this is focused on Zulu, but it's showing here on this one instance. This was in I'm sorry, this is in Zulu, but this is also in Kikongo as well. And this root Lunga, so this is the late Dr. Fukiao, who passed away on November 29th in 2013. He wrote these books, African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, Self-Healing Power and Therapy, as well as Simbi, Hold Up That Which Holds You Up. And, he talks about this concept called Kininga, balance, and Lunga, meaning balance and health. And I've shown also in Umoja Volume 2 in the first chapter, when I do my etymology on Ma'at, how Ma'at corresponds regularly with Lunga or variations with L and NG in the root of the Bantu languages, right? So this is very telling, because if Lunga also corresponds with Neb in Seneb, and we saw that this corresponds with Nim, Dib, Tep, Rif, all of those correspond. So Seneb would be cognate essentially with Ma'at, because this corresponds with Ma'at, which we also know means to be in harmony, balance. There's another Ma'at that deals with truth. That's a different etymology, and we deal with that in the text as well. So we'll have to come back to this. But in Chiluba, there is an expansion on this concept, because remember that there's lim and nim in Chiluba and Bantu as well. So this notion of nima, meaning get rich, to become heavier, to gain weight, to be heavy, to be important, to intensify. Why is this important here? Right? Remember, lim and nim are the same. So when we see the N here, the N has assimilated by regressive assimilation to the M, the following M. So the L has become nasal, just like the M here. So there's the same lemma, nima. So nima, to get rich, to become heavier. Why? What are we talking about here? Neme, heavy, important, distinguished. Neme na, way on, to be proud of, to do important things, to do or to get worse. Muka, gain importance, gain distinction, become influential. Nimeka, to respect, to honor, to worship. Remember, that's where the greetings come in, to send greetings of health, but also to honor, to worship in that same fashion. And then Bunema, prestige, influence, right, and law. Oh, and I skipped one, the main one. Nimi or Nime Kela, greet, pay respects, give impressions of respects, thank yous. So all of this is coming from words meaning heavy. Nimesha, enrich, make heavier, increase the weight, aggravate, make important, to give importance, to enforce. Right? This is why semantics is just as important in historical comparative linguistics as is phonology, right? Because that same weight, this concept of heaviness and weight, is what gives us Neb, Lord, Master, Possessor, or Owner. Nebet, Lady and Mistress. Neb, to bring forth the inundation. Nebwit, a heavenly cow associated with Thor, cow. And then we have this variant in Yoruba language, ribi, meaning important, right? Now again, why is this important? Because and here's in Sumerian, alim, elum, bison, heavy, important. Edim, to be heavy, to be important. These are different variations, and just like in Proto-Bantu D becomes Bantu L. And so you can see the interchange here in Sumerian, which shows us that the Proto-Bantu and Sumerian, derive from the same family, right? which we call the proto language being China into, right? And so you can see how the word for heavy becomes the same word for bison, right? Which is a big animal, big bull animal, right? But in Egyptian, that concept of heaviness becomes a word for hippopotamus, Debbie hippopotamus. But then there's another word, Dines, heavy one, Seth as a hippopotamus. But this word Dines comes from Dines, meaning to be weighty, to be heavy, to be irksome, to be burdensome, which comes from within. So remember what I told y'all, how you're able to tell what is a prefix and what is a suffix and what is the root. We know that the root is DN with a suffix S, because we have the same root, DN, with XW, to be heavy, to weigh upon, right? And then we have again Hatem, just like Hatep and Hateb, right? Seth as a hippopotamus, because Tim has to deal with weightiness, which in this variant, Khareb, which these are also these correspond to each other, hippopotamus off the set. So this notion of heaviness becomes, the descriptor of some big, large animal. So if they have a word for elephant, which they do, it's the same meaning. It's the same word for heavy, and this is what it is. But this word for heavy becomes also the word for king and majesty. So dada HM, him, majesty, chief, sovereign, corresponds to Chiluba, Kum, chief, or someone of weight, of social weight, Wakam, Chikomo, chief, right? So it's that same concept of weight that corresponds to the concept of to bend, to make heavy, to make something fall or sink because of its heaviness, because of its weight. So you have these different trajectories for heavy, where one has to deal with bowing down, then the sinking of the sun, to sit down, and then you have another direction where it's going to the identification of certain animals, certain large and dangerous animals, right? But then that same bending, that same weight to bending down now becomes to bow down, to submit, to be in submission, to lay down your weapons, right? And to beg for forgiveness, to beg for something, to exchange, to give obeisance, but also to worship, to pray. That's why you bow down when you pray. You look down when you pray. Like you get on your knees. And in Islam, you get on your knees and then you hold your arms up, right? Like they all, this is how all of this stuff ties together in from a diachronic perspective, right? And so now we get to the end. So how do we know that this stuff is borrowed into Semitic? Because of the correspondences, and we see that the Semitic cannot answer for the third consonant, but the Egyptian can answer for the third consonant, right? So very important. So like, when we're looking at words in different languages, we don't want to make the assumption that because they look alike or they sound alike, that they are in fact cognates. That's not how this goes. So an example here is an English mess, meaning a dirty or untidy state of things or of a place. With this Cachico Mayan language, they have a word mess, meaning mess, disorder, garbage. Now, these are chance lookalikes, and we know this because when we start looking at English words that start with M, they don't correspond to words that we find in Cachico, right? So either this is a coincidence, or more than likely Cachico borrowed the word mess from early English speakers when they arrived here, right? So Another way that you can tell if something is a borrowing is if you find the same or similar word in another language, but in one language, it is clear that there's an active morpheme involved in the process, whereas it does not exist in the second language. So, for example, in the Kanuri language, we have this word revel, and then te, it's just a suffix te, meaning write or writing. And we have this word kera, and then te, meaning read or reading, right? And so the te suffix in Kanuri is a grammatical feature that forms verbal nouns from verb roots. This feature is absent in Hausa. So we know that the Hausa language, when they have this word rubuta, because now they're trying to say it in a Hausa way, the V becomes B in between two vowels. And they may not have this sound here, so they say ta or tu, right? And matter of fact, they just inverted the vowels here, right? And so this kara tu, meaning karate, meaning read and reading, it's the same thing. But because this doesn't exist in Hausa, but it does in Kanuri, we know that it is from the Kanuri that that Robuta and Karatu were derived. And it is the same thing when it comes to Shalom, Salaam, Salaam, and even the variants for image. These words here are borrowed from the ancient Egyptian because the Egyptian has the grammatical morphemes that do not exist in Semitic. And of course, they are neighbors. And, in pre-dynastic time, ancient Egyptians were going into the Levant, and people in the Levant were going into Egypt. So, and here's just another kind of hefty graph, showing how an example of a borrowing in a proto-language, right? So with that being said, I am done with this presentation. And so I just want to end it with Inkwa Ngolo Vimpi, meaning Unk Uja Seneb, meaning life, prosperity, and health to you all. And, part 2, we're going to show how Seneb, Salaam, is related to Hotep in a very unique way. And we'll get some more nuances. So when people try to call you a Hotep, there's the Hotep is Salam, Shalom in Semitic, and there's other different variations, Sombele in Congo and other words, and then there's some native forms of course, in the Yoruba language that we talk about. So we're going to big up Hotep, and we're going to show how this is a Pan-African term, and how all of that, kind of plays into the present time, and of course with folks with their anti-Africanness. But that's what we're going to be dealing with in part 2. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure that you leave them below, or you can email me at info@osirmhotep.com, and I'll try to answer your questions there as well. So with that being said, we will see you next time for part 2. Peace.
This program was created with the love and support of all our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.